Okay, today we're going to learn how to convert decimals to percents and percents to decimals. Okay, back and forth. The first thing that I like to do is I like to think of my favorite drink. Dr. Pepper. Okay, why Dr. Pepper? Well, I think of Dr. Pepper because it reminds me of the order that the letters go in. DP, Dr. Pepper. Okay, just an abbreviation for it. But this is useful because it can tell you which way to move the decimal point when you're converting. Okay, decimals and percents are pretty much the same thing. It's just either multiplied or divided by 100, depending on the way you go. Let's use an example. Okay, let's say I've got decimal 38 or 38 hundredths. Okay, if I want to convert that to a percent, I'm going to use my Dr. Pepper from earlier. Okay, so I can write Dr. Pepper right in front of it. Now, that number is already a decimal. Okay, so I'm going to start out on the decimal side, and I'm going to move the decimal twice to make it in percent. Let's try it on the 38. 1, 2, and it would go at the end. So if we rewrote it, 38 hundredths would be 38 with a decimal, and I don't really need that decimal, so I can just rewrite that as just a whole number 38. Now, you add the percent sign. So, 38 hundredths is equivalent to 38%. But Mr. Cox, what happens if you have a percent and you want to make it a decimal? Well, let's look at that. Okay. If I have a percent, like, let's use a common one, 25%. And I want to make that into a decimal. Now in 25%, 25 is actually a whole number there. So the decimal point on any whole number would go at the end. Okay, using my Dr. Pepper model from above, Dr. Pepper, now I'm going from a percent on this side to a decimal over here. So I need to move the decimal 2 places to the left. Let's try it. Okay, and I can rewrite that as decimal 25 or 25 hundredths. Go ahead and add a 0 in the front. So 25% is equivalent to 25 hundredths. And this always works. Okay, let's try some harder numbers now. Let's try 1/8, which is one that I tell my students just to memorize. 1/8 I know is equivalent to 12 5/10%. So how do we make that into a decimal? Well, Dr. Pepper. Okay, right now it's a percent, and I want to make it into a decimal, so I need to move it 2 times to the left. So let's try it here. Once, twice. I'm moving the decimal. If I rewrote that, it would be decimal 125 or 125 thousandths. Go ahead and add a 0 in there. Okay. And this way, you won't get confused with which way to move the decimal point, because a lot of students forget or they accidentally move it in the wrong direction. This will help you out. Okay. And it is tricky sometimes. Say you might have a number like 4%. Okay, 4% is a whole number, so the decimal would go at the end. Now I have to move it twice. Once, twice. Notice that big gap right there? We need to fill that in with something. We're going to use a 0, okay, because 0 is the same for nothing in math. There's nothing right there. So this would actually equal decimal 0.4, or 4 hundredths. Another one that comes up a lot is converting something like 50%. Okay, again, it's a whole number, so the decimal goes at the end. Move it twice to the left because I'm going from a percent to a decimal. Okay, now if I rewrote that, it would be decimal 50 or 50 hundredths. And I can add a 0 in front. But I don't really need that 0 at the end. I could just make that 5/10, because 5/10 is equivalent to 50 hundredths.